Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accessibility in Software. This is a brand new free course which we are running here on CodeCamp. My name is George Sprouse, and I am a self-taught website developer. Actually, I'll get into myself in just a sec. This is CodeCamp, and this is a fairly new server that we have opened up as part of SkillCamp. We are a developer community helping to take your concept from idea to working application. We have lots of free classes coming soon. Some of those classes are for supporting members, stuff like our boot camps and our labs, which I'll get into in a second. And we are a part of SkillCamp, which is a 501c3 non-profit offering free and no-cost classes to learn new skills to help you accomplish your life goals. So whether that might be screenwriting on ScriptCamp, we have WordCamp for novel writing. Those are our two biggest servers here on Discord. We have Film Camp for filmmaking, Creative Camp for content creation, Tune Camp for art and animation, Lingo Camp for language learning, Game Camp for game development. That's one of our newest ones. Code Camp, which you're on for coding. We've recently announced AI Camp, and we've got Design Camp also in the works. So come by our new servers, say hello, and we hope that you learn lots from us. I'm George Sprouse. I am a self-taught website developer. I first started learning programming about 10 years ago, give or take. I taught myself Python when I was 14, and more relevant to this particular class, I am disabled, and I became a disability activist to help change society so that it's more inclusive and we can help more disabled people access software better, access websites and that sort of thing. And so I'm really able to sort of merge my hobbies with my identity to help make this help improve society in that way, even if some people consider it a small way. Membership. So you can become a SkillCamp member. These are our different options. Upgrades to VIP for just $9 a month so that you get access to exclusive Discord channels. You help support our free events, access to our video library. But that excludes most of our courses. If you want access to all of our courses across all SkillCamp servers, then you should upgrade to Bootcamper, just $20 a month, $19 a month. And you get access to the Writers Lab on ScriptCamp and also for prose writing. You get hundreds of hours of live classes each month, and a discount off of our screenplay consultation and proofreading. Over on our two biggest servers, we have lots of events, such as Script Swap. We have 2 of them each week on Tuesdays and Fridays. It also says Wednesdays there, but that's because of a dateline. If you're writing a screenplay, you can swap critique for features and pilots or shorts with other writers. Table reads, we have 3 of those each week, again for ScriptCamp, Sunday, Tuesday, and Saturday. And we have our prose equivalent for Writer's Voice on WordCamp on Saturday/Sunday and Thursday. Here are some of the courses that we are offering. Discord Bot Developers Lab is Thursday. All of these times are Pacific time. Thursdays at 3 p.m. here on CodeCamp. Web Design Bootcamp starts next week on this time slot. Script Analysis, TV and Feature Bootcamp, Advanced Lab, Writers Lab, Novel Bootcamp, Fiction Lab, and we have our Video Editing Bootcamp starting mid-February. This is the schedule for Feature Bootcamp, which has just started. If you're writing a feature, we'll get you should be able to get your first drafts complete by the end of March. And if you want access to our bootcamps, then you can purchase them individually at scriptcamp.net/classes, or you can start a free trial, unlimited membership for just $19 a month at scriptcamp.net. So let's talk about accessibility in software. When we talk about accessibility, we often are talking about how we as developers give disabled people an alternative way to access software. It's a part of software development that is continually growing, it's continually developing, and there are lots of new methods continually being developed and added into like specifications, which I'll go into a little bit later. And yeah, it's constantly being revised, and as more and more disabled people talk about how they access the web and the shortfalls that they experience, developers are always working to try and make it easier for people to access. Yeah, it's always growing, and technology is a very fast-moving industry. It's always developing. I teach the web bootcamp and other bootcamps here, and it's always changing. I mean, think about how much websites have developed and changed since like the 90s. How like if you had a 90s style looking website today, you probably won't do very well. I mean, people might visit it for nostalgia, but besides that, you wouldn't get many users. So it's continually developing, continually changing, and so accessibility has to keep up with that, with the new designs and that sort of thing. The internet by nature is designed to ensure that everyone can have access. Everyone's able to use it to communicate or to share information, and that sort of thing. And that should be regardless of like personal characteristics, race, religion, age, gender, whatever. The internet is designed to integrate people. And so that means that, well, if it's meant to help and connect everyone, we need to think about everyone. But unfortunately, developers often forget about disabled people, or quite often it's an afterthought, or we have to do it in order to tick a box. Fun fact, about 20 to 25% of the people in the world, of the world's population, are disabled. And so it is really important that we are including everyone. Disabled people are the largest minority in the world. So it is really important that we are not targeting, that makes it sound like shooting practice. We are trying to help and include those people. So, with everything I've just said, I feel like the answer to this question should be quite simple. Why should we care about about accessibility? Firstly, if you want to go down the legal route, it is the law in many countries to ensure that disabled people have access and are not unfairly disadvantaged. Places like the US, the EU, and the UK all have laws that say you should include disabled people. You have to make any reasonable adjustments. This is UK law, at least. Any reasonable adjustments to ensure that people are not excluded based on race, religion, gender, sexuality, age, and that sort of thing, and disability. I can't speak too much for American law, but I believe that says something similar. You have the Americans with Disabilities Act, I think it's called. And the EU will have their own version as well. So by law, you should be complying anyway. But aside from that, if you get clients in the future, it's possible they are, if you are really really competent, you might get a government contract, a government organization or maybe an educational facility, they will need accessibility included and thought of through the contract. That will be in the contract because they need their users, again, by law, to be able to access their services, whatever that might be that they're offering. If you're creating like a e-learning platform, for example, for a college, then you will need to create a way so that if a school has a blind student, for example, they are still able to access that platform. Oops. And accessible products also benefit the experience for non-disabled people. So, for example, if someone's in a noisy room, a person with good hearing will be able to understand a video if it has subtitles. Or maybe it's just a technology issue. Maybe their mouse is broken, but they can still use the keyboard in order to navigate the software. Like, for example, you can use Control-C in order to copy text, and that sort of thing, rather than having to use a mouse. But they can still use that software because you thought of accessibility. So it doesn't just affect the biggest minority in the world, but it can affect non-disabled people as well. So, bit of interaction. I always like a bit of interaction in my classes. What disabilities can you think of? You can put them in chat, and I'll be able to see it in real time. What sort of disabilities might there be? You can probably think of like 2 or 3 off the top of your head. Definitely. Nacho says mobility issues and vision. Those are the 2 that that people generally think of first. And also cognitive, yes. Others might include hearing impairments or being deaf. Oopsie. Oh, there we go. Being deaf or hard of hearing. Mobility issues. Stamina, breathing, and fatigue. That's like a big category of disabilities. So yeah, issues with energy levels maybe, and breathing. That might not affect software so much. Mental health is also classed as a disability in many places. Problems with dexterity, learning disabilities or cognitive disabilities, vision impairment, wheelchair users, autism. And I guess autism can also, that's also a big group. That's one condition in a larger group of neurodivergence, where you might have like sensory issues or processing disorders. So being overwhelmed by a lot of information. You want to do that again? No? Okay, there we go. So how do we implement good accessibility? The first step is research. And if you are here, then that's probably why you are here. Speech issues. Nacho reminded me that there are also speech issues. Thank you for that. Yeah, so if you are here, probability is you are attempting to do research. That is the first step to implementing good accessibility. There are lots and lots of sort of ideas and guidelines and guides that people upload. So read them. It can be quite intimidating. It can feel like there is a lot to include, a lot to think about, which maybe is why accessibility is often done badly, because there is so much to look at and so much to learn and to understand. So it's really important that you research all the different categories, how it can affect people, and that sort of thing. Once you sort of research it, you need to make a plan before you start coding. Don't leave this until after you've nearly finished your project, because then you're just going to make your life harder, because you can really tell when accessibility is thought about all the way through. If it's sort of like an afterthought, then the whole software won't be accessible. It will kind of have a surface layer of accessibility, which makes it difficult for people to use. So you need to plan accessibility into the app, ideally before you start, just so that you can then be sure you haven't missed anything. If it's something that's constantly in your mind, yeah, it'll be much better. Your product will be much better. And finally, test the site. Both you and it'd be amazing if you can get members of a disabled community to test your product. It is hard, I think, to find people to test a product at the best of times, let alone testing one specific part. You could get able-bodied people to test accessibility, but the chances are they won't know what they're looking for. So ask members of a disabled community. Ask them to test your product. If it works with their adaptations, like their aids, and we'll get into some of the aids in a second. And I can't believe I have to say this, but I do. Make sure you listen and take in their feedback. Many people don't do that. You'll be surprised how many don't. They sort of ask people so that they can tick a box. Do not be that person. Make sure that you are taking on board your feedback and making as much change as you can in order to implement that feedback, because there is no better advice than the advice from people who have lived experience of a disability. You could ask doctors, yes, but they almost never can give you that lived experience where they kind of just know everything about the disability and how it affects the day-to-day life. They might have all the theory, they might have all the, this is why it happens, this is the science behind it, but they probably don't have that understanding of how it affects people day to day. So make sure you ask disabled community members to test the product, listen to their feedback, and try and implement it. This is in the wrong place. This is the number of people roughly reflected in the UK, how many disabled people there are. I thought this slide was before the one I just did. So if anyone's interested, 18% of the UK population is deaf, roughly. It's really hard to get an exact number, obviously. But I think this is kind of representative of the whole world. Yeah, it surprises me too that 18%, is that right? 18% of disabled people, I think. Is it? I can't remember what it is now. But that's how it's split up. There's a lot of deaf people, and some of them identify as disabled, some don't. But yeah. Let's take a look at this. Adaptations. There are lots of different accessibility aids. Oh, by the way, if I'm going too quickly or you have any questions, please do feel free to interrupt me, ask in the chat. One of my issues is I go way too quickly sometimes. If you need like me to slow down, please do say, because otherwise I will be done in no time. There are lots of adaptations that can be used. You can have braille displays, you can have screen magnifiers, and lots of different technologies. So if you're blind, for example, you could have a number of different adaptations. You could have braille displays, or you could have screen magnifiers, and things like that, screen readers as well. So braille displays convert text on the screen to braille. We use small pins which can be changed by the software, like these little dots that pop up. Are you all familiar with what braille is? It's like a grid of, like a 2x3 grid of dots but you can like swipe your finger across and just each pattern of dots represents a different letter. And this device can change the layout of the dots so that you can run your finger across and read that way. And you can also type as well. You've got like these little buttons here, which allow you to type in Braille. Screen magnifiers allow you to enlarge content so that users can read smaller text. This might mean that the user can't see the whole screen all at once. If they're zoomed into the center part of the screen, we're not going to be able to see around the edges of the screen. So that might be a thing you have to think about. How can, or be aware of at least. A user might not be able to see the screen, the whole screen at any given time. And actually, there might be other reasons for that. For non-disabled people, maybe they're using a phone with a smaller device, a smaller screen, sorry. And so they can't see the whole screen all at once. They have to zoom in. And so one of the things you should do is make sure that your text is big enough that people aren't having to zoom in or squint and stuff like that. And yeah, so that's one of the adaptations that someone might use. Some magnifying apps also allow the user to change other display settings. Stuff like the color contrast, you can increase that because a lot of eye conditions mean that you can't, you lose color contrast. Or they might invert the colors so that it's easier on the eyes. I don't know if you've like ever read at night on like a Kindle or something like that, and you have a white background and black text. That is bad for your eyes. So a lot of blind people will invert colors so that it's in dark mode maybe, and it just is less taxing on their eyes for people who still have some vision left. Which again, you might need to be aware of because the color scheme of your website, for example, might look different on different devices. Switches. Switches are alternatives to a mouse and or keyboard. They can have many different forms, many different setups. You might have buttons or levers. You might have tubes that you can blow and suck into, which can trigger certain actions. So you might have like 5 buttons to navigate a menu. You might have, like arrows on your keyboard, left, down, right, and up, and you can sort of navigate through menus like that and hit enter to go through a menu. Or it might be something more simple where you just have one button and the software automatically goes through each option. So you might have, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example of a menu. You might have a menu and every 3 seconds the software will automatically like switch through the different buttons that you could press, and you press a button when the one you want is selected. So that's an example of a switch. So switches can often take a lot longer, or not even a lot, it can take longer than, say, a mouse to access. So allowing that time for users to be able to press a button or navigate to the menu they want. And screen readers. These are software that allow blind and visually impaired people to operate computers or to be able to hear what's on the screen. These take the elements on the screen and filter out content that isn't semantically relevant. Here's what I mean by that. Take a look at the yellow column on the left. This is what a code for a website would look like. And when we start our web bootcamp next week, I can sort of talk you through a bit more about what this code actually is. But we have like the title of a page, we have a heading called site name, and we have a paragraph which looks like this lorem ipsum text. We also have a form with a form input where you can put your mobile number. You can see that in the green column here, and a submit button. And you can, if you look at the yellow column, you can kind of see all of that code and sort of figure out which bit is which. So the left column is what a website would get, what you give a browser to be able to convert it into this GUI, this graphical user interface. And this GUI is what what an average person would see in their internet browser. What you don't see is when a developer gives this code to a browser, the browser also makes an accessibility tree, which has similarities to HTML, but is also pretty different. So you might have the web area, which is the page. You might have the heading, which is formatted like this. So we can see the roles of each of these things. So some stuff will have a heading, some of it will be a text field or like an input box for text. Some will be buttons, and you can see all of that in the roles here in the blue column with all the names. Now, something that you might have noticed is for our label and our input, we've actually linked the two. So where the ID is 4, that's our label. For mobile, and you can see that in the GUI there. And then with the 5th ID for our text field, we have an attribute which is an array. That's the square brackets here. And that is referencing the ID of 4, the label. So that's how screen readers are able to tell what a input is for, what label goes for which input. So that if I was blind and I hovered over like the input box, if it wasn't connected to the label, it would just say input box. Well, if I can't see what the label is, that's not very helpful to me. I don't know what I'm meant to input in there. Which is why we have this labeled by IDs. So then it can say input box for mobile, for example. So there's a lot of things that the browser does, and I will be talking a lot about the web today because that's where my expertise is. That's what I've trained as. That's my specialism. So sorry, I lost my train of thought. That's where my expertise is. You have this sort of this way. This is how you define it in a website, and this is what the browser does behind the scenes, and it will send this accessibility tree into a screen reader or other accessibility adaptations. So yeah, I think that's quite interesting. I forgot to delete that slide. Here are other adaptations. Keyboard shortcuts. This is like helpful for people who might have low dexterity. They might use a keyboard instead of a mouse. Hang on, I'm going to print up my notes quickly. So you might have if you have low dexterity, maybe it's harder for you to grip a mouse. Sorry, this is updated. Give me just 1 second. Okay, there we go. So yeah, people who might not be able to grip a mouse if they've got low dexterity, you can make everything on the GUI, the user interface, accessible or operable by a keyboard, and that can be really helpful for people again whose mouse might be broken. So I don't know if you've ever tried this, but on some websites you can press the tab button, and again it switches through the different options that you can click. That's something that's helpful to some people. And you have to manually code that in for the most part. You have to specify, okay, which order, when you press tab, which item should be selected first. If you press tab again, which is second, third, and so on. Another adaptation might be dictation, or voice control, it's called on Apple. There's a lot of different accessibility settings on iPhone and Android phones. And actually, if you're interested in testing some of these, you can go into your phone settings, into the accessibility menu, and start testing them. So, for example, on my phone, I've got VoiceOver, which is the screen reading software. And I'd encourage you to try some of these settings actually, just to help you understand how they work, and that really helps you to make better software. But yeah, voice control allows users to control their device with just their voice. So you can set commands a bit like Siri. You can say, Siri, call mum, for example. I hope I didn't trigger anyone's phones when I said that. Yeah, so that's one example of a kind of voice control. Voice control is a bit more advanced than Siri, and is especially designed for disabled people. You might also have used dictation as well. If you've used speech to text on Microsoft Word or something, you can. That's one example of dictation. Some people have dedicated software in order to do that, or some people just use Siri to do what they need. Are there any questions that you have so far? All right. Looks like we don't have any questions. So, as I said before, web accessibility is or website design and development is my area of expertise. So I want to take a little bit of time and look at what's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And it is intimidating, to be quite honest. These are a collection of documents for web developers to help make websites more accessible. And we're currently on version 2.2, which is the latest version published towards the end of last year. It's grouped into 4 principles. Those 4 principles are sort of like the categories of guidelines, I guess. And there are 13 guidelines. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go through them all. There's a lot of them. Because those guidelines are also split into success criteria, which you might go into a little bit of depth, but not completely. And again, I would encourage you to take a look at it for yourself. Those 4 principles that I talked about, they are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means that all content on websites is able to be it is shown in some way to the user. According to the WCAG, it can't be invisible to all of their senses. So even if they can't see it, they're able to hear it using the screen reader, for example. Or if they can't hear, then they've got subtitles, or something like that. All web content is able to be given to them, presented to them in some way. Operable means that all users should be able to use the interface. That's pretty self-explanatory. You're able to interact with it in some way. When we talk about it being understandable, the content should be presented in a way where the user is able to understand the interface. Maybe it's intuitive, or maybe you're like trying to avoid complex words that people might not understand. It should be your website needs to be clear. And again, all of these are really important for non-disabled people too. If an able-bodied person doesn't understand how to use your website, they will just leave. They won't waste their time trying to figure it out. You need to make it as understandable, easy, intuitive to use as possible. And finally, robust. Is the content that you have going to be accessible with the current assistive technologies, and with ones that are sort of in the future, the ones that are emerging, because like I say, technology is always changing, and it's something that you have to constantly be aware of, and constantly refresh in your mind about. Like I say, there are 78 success criteria. Some of them are quite similar, some of them are very different. I'm going to give you a bit of a intro into each of them as much as I can. Not into each of them, into as many of them as I can. And yeah, like I said at the beginning, you should know that while this is the current standard, standards can always be improved. Standards do improve. The new version, version 3, should be out next year. And yeah, generally updates every year or so. Sometimes minor changes, sometimes major changes. And I hear that version 3 is going to be a lot more reflective of the way that we use technology now. So version 2.2 talked a little bit about how it should look on mobile devices, but it hasn't touched on a lot of newer technologies. It's still in the early versions of a draft, but I want to discuss them when that version comes out next year. Do I want to use the slide or not? I'm going to go into my Word document and do it that way. So let's do a brief overview of how of these principles. And first, of all these guidelines. The first principle. See if I can spell. Where's my Word document button gone? There. Is that right? Yes, it did. Cool. So principles is perceivable. Let me zoom in a lot. There we go. So we have 5 different guidelines. Oh no, we don't. We have. Let me open this. Yeah. No, we have 2 different guidelines. Give me 1 second. So we have 4 guidelines. Sorry. One of those is text alternatives. So this is about content that isn't text, it should have alternate text. So, any text, any videos or images that you use, you should have a way of communicating what that media is about to a screen reader, for example, to someone who can't see it. So if you have a picture of, if you have a diagram, for example, you need alt text to be able to describe what that diagram is showing, because in most cases, screen reading software won't be able to interpret it or read it in the right way. So for media elements, give alt text to describe content. For other media, and I feel like these two should go together, but for media, you need to include subtitles, which again, helpful to able-bodied people as well as disabled people. Maybe you include audio description, which helps those who are blind. It sort of narrates the experience, or narrates what's happening on screen. We might have sign language. Now, sign language can be quite expensive and hard to implement. But the reason there's a desire to have sign language is actually for a lot of deaf people, sign language is their first language. If you're born deaf in particular, into like a deaf family, sign language will probably be the first language that you learn. I mean, imagine if your first language is English and you know Spanish, but not very well, maybe. If you got like a legal document, for example, and you had to fill it in Spanish, you would probably struggle a bit more than if it was in your first language. So sign language is really important. It's hard to implement. It's really expensive. But also it's the first language for some people. And I think with everything in everything in the world, the more common something is, the cheaper it becomes, the more readily accessible it is. So sometimes having sign language and bringing more of it into the world, and having to like Disney Plus just released a new series called Echo, which is about a deaf superhero, and she uses sign language, and there's a lot of characters who use sign language as well. And the more that it's seen in society, the more normalized it becomes, the more people want to learn sign language. It's a bit in a kind of way when the Queen's Gambit was released. There was a sudden mass interest in people wanting to learn how to play chess. And in the same way, that can happen with disabilities too. If there's a new TV show that like Echo, which highlights a certain disability, there's often a sudden growth of interest in that topic. My point being, the more sign language there's in the world, the more people would be more willing to learn it. So if you include sign language in your software, not always feasible, I know, but if you do, you're also helping the deaf community not just understand it more clearly, but encouraging able-bodied people to also want to learn it. I hope I explained that well. something else that might be helpful, particularly for long audio content, audio, that's how you spell audio content. And yeah, having a transcript, which is like a long block of text. It can look like a mess sometimes if you do it badly. If you do it well, you can make it like really fit in, and that's really helpful for people who are deaf. Maybe they have some hearing, but I mean, think about when you're really trying to listen to quiet sounds for a long time. You start like your ears experience a kind of strain, and so including a transcript is really helpful to allow you to not have to focus so much on what you can hear. You can use a transcript to help. Having two methods is really helpful. It's actually a bit like a phone call. It's easier to have face-to-face conversations sometimes because when you're struggling to hear, you can also lip read a little bit, and you have context. You have more context, so you might be able to figure out what a conversation is about. And if there's terminology you've not heard before in a transcript, you can read it, and sometimes reading it helps you figure out the meaning of a word. So there's actually a few reasons to have subtitles / captions and transcripts. And it's not just deaf people who benefit. It might be people with audio processing disorders, for example. People who, when there's lots of different background noise, maybe, again, just reduces the amount of attention you have to spend on trying to decode these different sounds. People with audio processing disorders might struggle with decoding these sort of sounds that they're hearing. So having a visual way as well as an audio way can be really helpful for them. The next guideline is adaptability. Adaptability. And this is about how content can be adapted for different devices. So for example, if you have a small screen, which again comes into like making responsive websites. So responsive websites being responsive websites being the website will show up in a clear way, no matter what screen size it is on, whether it's a mobile device with a small screen or a computer with a bigger screen. That all the information that should be on the page is on that page. You don't have to like move around side to side and stuff like that. Orientation. Now, what I mean by that is some devices have to be on a certain way. So some iPads are attached to wheelchairs. There's like a number of people with cerebral palsy, for example, who use iPads to communicate with other people if they're not able to speak themselves. But it's fixed to their chair. They're not able to turn it portrait quite often. It has to be landscape. And so your software should be able to work landscape or portrait, which again is related to responsive design. info and relationships I spoke a little bit about, and again that's linked to like the site. Sorry, let me show you. I showed this a second ago. So it's linked to this. This idea of the accessibility tree. We have the label and the text field linked to each other. That is the old photo. This one. Where we have the label and the text field, again, linked to each other. So that's info and relationships. We have meaningful sequence. So all information should be in a logical order. You need to have, for example, a lot of sites will have the navigation at the top of a website. You might have content in a logical order, which makes it clear for everyone. So it's helpful for people with screen readers so that they know generally which bit of a page they need to be focusing on, because they can't just see it. Like when able-bodied people look at a website, we can see pretty much the whole page in one glance, and we can work out where we need to go. But people with screen readers can only really focus on one element at a time. So having it in a set order makes it easier so that blind people in particular can go, okay, this is where I need to tell my screen reader to go. I'm not interested in the navigation bar, I'm interested in the bit afterwards, in the main content. Or maybe I'm interested in the footer, and I can tell my screen reader, go to the footer section. In a logical order. It's also helpful for those who have learning disabilities. If you're like moving your conversation around a lot, and like sort of bouncing around each topic, and there's no like logical order, it can get quite hard to follow conversations like that. So it's a similar sort of thing with websites as well, or with software. This is a lot of information. Let me see if I can summarize it a bit more. I feel like I might be going into too much detail for all of this. One other thing that I missed, I'll go into less detail for all the others. For adaptations is sensory characteristics, which basically means that the things that are on the page, content should, instructions shouldn't rely solely on anything sensory. So you shouldn't use like a color to differentiate between things necessarily, or just one type of characteristic. You need to provide various methods or various ways of distinguishing different aspects from each other. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. Let's take a look at briefly some of the other principles. I'm not going to get into too much detail. It's a lot of information to take in at once. The next principle is operable. How well can people interact with your interface? How can people interact? So we had, for example, using a keyboard only method. So that, again, people who can't grip a mouse are still able to operate. Giving people enough time to interact, which is helpful for people with learning disabilities, or again, people who use screen readers. Screen readers is coming up a lot, I know, but it takes them longer to go through menus. And people who use switches, all of those methods generally take longer than it will take the average person. So make sure you're giving enough users enough time to read and use the content. Don't use content that could cause people seizures. Or other physical reactions like that. So no, flashing lights kind of thing. And sometimes flashing lights can affect people with sensory processing disorders, or they can get overwhelmed by all of the visual information. Help users to use to navigate and find content. Again, this comes into putting these things in a meaningful sequence, keeping things in a logical order. And we said keyboard only method, but what about people who can't use a keyboard? So give a way for users to access without the use of a keyboard. Maybe they can only use a mouse, for example. So yeah, basically the long and short, to summarize operable, make sure you are given enough time. You're not creating anything that can overwhelm someone, and you are creating multiple methods for someone to interact with content. Our third principle is understandable. And this is about making content clear. It should be intuitive, and operate in predictable ways, according to the WCAG. And it can also include helping users avoid and correct mistakes that they make. One example of this might be autocorrect. Using input types to check the content is correct in correct format. So, for example, if you are inputting an email address, there's a checker on most sites that will make sure that the email address is in the proper format. You've got an @ symbol, you've got like something like .com at the end, and that sort of thing. There's a certain number of letters that there has to be in there. And finally, the last principle is robust. Which again, making the content accessible to aids, both current and emerging. Because it takes a while to think about all these accessibility needs. You're going to want to think ahead to make sure that you don't have to make changes within a year. So this again takes a lot of research and planning. So making it accessible and compatible. Okay, so those are our 4 principles. Can I get it all on one page? No. If I do that, is that all in one page? Not quite. I don't want to make it too small. But is there anything that you want me to go over in more detail? Alright, looks like we might finish a little bit early. So just to finish up, let's take a look at a couple of case studies. Just to see whether I've taught you well. Put that theory into practice. If I go back to my PowerPoint, there we go. So, we should be considering how people with these disabilities can access the software that we are making. Is this going to go and do what I've asked it to do? No, apparently not. There we go. I went up. Okay. So, case study 1. John is a visually impaired person who uses assistive technology to access the internet. I forgot to add animations. Hmm. Give me 1 second here. I'm just quickly changing the PowerPoint. There we go. So, case study 1. John is a visually impaired person who uses assistive technology to access the internet. His disability means that he finds it difficult to read small text and finds it difficult to distinguish colors. What adaptations might he use, and how can I missed a bit out. He wants to access online banking. What adaptations might he use, and how can a bank adapt their website so that users like John can use the platform efficiently? Nacho says, how about adding some area labels to the buttons, improve the visibility and the color scheme? Yes. You can swap typing live. I didn't realize that. Yes. So, what adaptations might he use as well? Because there's always things that each party can do. There's always stuff that the bank can do, and there's always stuff that the user can do in order to make it more easy for the disabled person. I spent ages and ages describing everything to realize I had turned off my mic and forgot to turn it back on. Oh man, that's okay. I'll say everything I said again. Okay, so there's always things that the disabled person and the website developer can do. Um, so, for example, the disabled person, yeah, Nacho, you were right. You can use screen reading software and stuff like that. The issue with using screen reader software is that you could end up compromising your own information. You could be typing in your bank details, your sort code, your account number, whatever, stuff like that. And that can compromise your security. It might be okay if you're home alone, but what if you're in a hotel room? Having a screen reader could, if you're in a hotel room that has spinning walls, other people might be able to hear you. Can you hear me now? I want to check before I continue. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'm not saying anything right now, but if you can hear me, man, that's good. I'll continue. Okay. I was worried that I was saying stuff again and you couldn't hear me. Okay, fine. So yeah, the belt allows him to read things more securely. And the bank can do stuff as well. So stuff like, as you said, Nacho, um, uh, audio browser extension to change the color contrast. You might have a plugin that allows you to change certain settings, display settings. There's often a slider that you can use in order to change the font size and things like that. Change color scheme and other things like that. Other website adaptations allowing people to use a switch, so making it clear what options are available to for the user to use. So making it clear where the login button is, making forms accessible, using like the form, the input box and the labels, making them connected. So things like that. I want to actually show you an accessibility issue that I found yesterday on the ScriptCamp website. And we're in the process of getting it fixed. I pointed it out to the developer. I can't see the button I want. There it is. There we go. Whoa. So here we have the beautiful ScriptCamp website. Sign up here. But here's the issue. There are two login buttons, which isn't particularly clear for most people. Which login button should I use? Now, to a lot of people who know what Discord is, we know that this button here allows you to log in with Discord, and this one presumably doesn't. Now, I wasn't entirely sure whether this one is just like a normal login button that anyone can use, or if this one is specifically for staff. Some websites have a login button that only allows you to log in if you are a member of staff, but the average user can't log on to. So I wasn't sure about this button. However, it's even worse for blind people, in particular, people who are using screen readers. In a lot of browsers, I think in every browser, you can open up developer tools, which you do on a computer by pressing the F12 button, or if you're on Windows, Control Shift I. If you're